Leave it on there. Ready?
The word of God is eternal. And every word of God will be fulfilled.
That's it. Keep it going.
Will be fulfilled. If you do not repent,
Give you a clap before you started.
Well, actually save him from hell.
your words are
I think that's your words.
Just keep it running.
okay. Or you can threaten me like you can. But I tell you this, the blood of Jesus Christ, God's Son.
It's okay, John, you can have a rest now. Have a rest.
I don't need a rest.
Same out.
You can say what you like.
You're speaking.
Sorry guys, can we go through?
If you think that I am an old man,
Don't let her digress. She goes, then she'll go away, she'll discharge your mother. Because when she can answer, this is what she does. I'm very familiar with it. When you're discussing other people, I'll make sure he wants
Okay, we need a timer. Can someone be our timer? Sir, can you be our timer? We have a clock. Why don't you come here?
Have you paid for tickets? Show your tickets, please.
Just so you all know what's happening today. Shabir and I, we just met about a month ago. Yes, we did.
God.The, my brother.
Hey, we did.
I did. Good. So I'm not going to have no space to film.
First come, first served.
No, I'm not having that. I'm not having that.
You have to be ruthless.
Yeah, that's right. Done now.
Pretty
God.The.
good friends.
Coming through.
And what we're going to do today, we're going to debate.
MOB, coming through. Sorry, sir.
Discuss. You may discuss, I'm going to debate.
Nobody don't want to
This is the best place to do it. And look, they're all here to hear you. If you're going to confront me, I'm going to confront you. That's a debate. Okay, we're going to go. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Then you're going to give me 5 minutes. But we need a timekeeper here. Come to the front. Come to the center here. Then you have a countdown timer. 5, 4, 3, 2.
That's what I'm saying.
That'll be 5 minutes for him. So does your clock go 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2, and 1? Does anybody have a countdown timer?
Somebody must have an iPhone that has that.
Yeah, but yeah, why don't you come forward? Let me get this. What's that? Is it on? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello. Should be on. Yeah, it's on. All right, 5 minutes. Now, before we start, let's just make some ground rules, what we're going to do here. This is a debate today, or a discussion, as Shabir calls it. That means we ask that you do not heckle us. Shabir, you're in charge of the Muslims. I'm in charge of the Christians. You've got the harder job, because you're going to have to make
Have you met Hatun?
Now, Shabir, when I speak, there will be many Muslims that will try to drown me out. You need to keep them quiet. Okay. When you lie, when you
I don't think there's no possibility they can do it. So don't worry. No, if they do,
I don't want to have to debate 10 minutes instead of just 1 minute.
No, I'm going to look, brothers, sisters, as Jay has pointed out, it is only courtesy. Of course, we all will get overtaken with our emotions on our own side, but let's try and keep calm. The sun is hot enough for us today, so let's be calm and let's each other hear out what the other is saying. Okay?
You may have to shout a bit.
Okay, let's go ahead and
I
get
can't
started.
shout, not in the same department.
Are you looking for a job in the assembly?
Sorry? I tried, but they voted Sadiq instead.
No, that's not the assembly.
Shall I get started?
Look
Okay.
at the Muslim.
Are we ready? Let's go ahead.
Good Muslim, you say.
Stop. Are we ready?
That's a good Muslim.
Thank you, Sami. Thank you.
I will call myself.
Control.
Actually, I will call myself the good Muslim.
Jay, start your practice now. Stop.
I will call myself.
Are we ready? Today we're going to ask the question, who is God? And is Jesus God? Now the question has come up many times here at Speaker's Corner. We've always had this question that's come up. Where does Jesus ever say, I am God? Muslims then say, where does he say, worship me? Jesus doesn't say, I am God, worship me. But does he ever say, I am God? Yes, he does. And the best place to look for that is John chapter 8, verse 58, which we had a discussion about a month ago. In John 8:58, it's very clear that Jesus is talking about Abraham. And he's saying earlier in the verse 41 that Abraham did not want to kill me. He's talking to Jews. He's in the temple. Therefore, he's talking in Hebrew to the Jews in the temple. In verse 56, he says, your father Abraham rejoiced at seeing my day, which means he was talking with Abraham. And of course, the Jews got upset. And they said, how can you talk about speaking with Abraham? You're not even 50 years old. And Jesus responds in verse 58. Before Abraham was, I am. In the Greek, it is Eimi. That is the clearest reference we have of Jesus saying, I am God. John 8:58. Now when he said that, of course, look at the reaction of the Jews. The Jews took up stones as if to stone him. And he walked away. And he hid from them. It says there in John 8. Why did the Jews pick up stones to stone him? Because they knew that he was claiming God's holy name. Eimi is the Greek translation of Yahweh, or Hashem, which comes from Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. The first part of Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. Hashem, See, that's the phrase that God gave to Moses in 1400 BC. In 1400 BC, God was asking Moses, he was there, he appeared in the burning bush, and Moses was going to go down to Egypt, and he wanted to know the name of God before he went down, so that the Israelites who were in captivity there in Egypt will know which God he represented. And that's why he said, Ehe, Hashem, Ehe. Tell the people there that it is me, it is I am, who has sent you. And in verse 15, he repeats the word again, Yahweh. This is the third person singular. Ehe is the first person singular. So now we get the third person singular, and he said, and this shall be my name forever from generation to generation, which means it's still God's name today. And it's the name that all the prophets used. It's the most popular name for God in the Old Testament. This is God's personal name. This is the name that shows him as separate from all other gods. To recognize which God we're talking about, you need to use this name. This is the name that Moses then used. And this is the name he took with him when he went down to Egypt. And this is the name that Jesus was using there in the first century, 1400 years later. Now, that's going to puzzle him, and he's going to decide he doesn't like that. We're going to see what your questions are concerning that. How much more time do we have? 1 minute. But folks, what I'm going to do today, we're going to unpack that name. We're going to look at that name. We're going to see why it's so important. And we're going to see why God chose that name. And we're going to see why the translators use the translations they use. And then we're going to come back to Jesus and see where that name is found elsewhere. Where we can find it elsewhere. After that, we're going to go look and see what is the name that Moses would have heard in 1400 BC. And we're going to ask some questions of the Quran. We're going to ask some questions of the same incident that we find in Surah 20. But folks, after today, I hope all of you, especially Muslims, I expect you are listening to this debate, because you're going to hear something. Some of the things we're saying will not be pleasing. We know that. Other things that we say are going to be hard to understand. But folks, bear with us. I now give it over to you, and I ask you now, as a rebuttal, what are you going to do with Eimi in John 8:58?
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I am not going to be able to exceed the lung power of the brother here, but I will try my best. Okay? The subject matter which Jay mentioned last month was, is there any definitive evidence of Jesus saying he is God? Basically, is Jesus God? From my perspective, usually one would have to consider the evidence that is available. Now, insofar as the evidence is concerned, obviously, my friend Jay's perspective, Jesus claims to be God in the Bible. The initial problem that I find with this particular contention of Jay is this.
Shabir, speak louder.
That's all I can do. That's the very issue.
Just stop the clock. We are recording this. This will be up on YouTube. You can get it later on.
Thank you. Yeah? The major issue that I have with the contention is this. That number one, there is no definitive statement attributed to Jesus explicitly claiming divinity in the Bible. There is not one. If there was, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Having said that, the other major problem I find is this, that of his own admission, my friend Jay has already stated that the Bible is corrupted. He himself made the admission here that the Bible has been changed.
We never make this claim. We never make this claim about the Bible.
Can you prove?
We would never make the claim about the Bible. We don't have the original Bible. We know it's been changed.
The question I would ask myself, it's an opposition. Yeah? You see, at the end of the day, if you have made the admission that the information you are obtaining or extracting to formulate your conclusions is based on a book which you yourself have admitted is not entirely trustworthy, then it begs the question how it is that you are accepting what is contained within that book. But having said that, one asks oneself, the claim is being made that Jesus is God. On what basis is this claim being made by our friend? It is being made on the idea that the term Eimi is somehow related to what was said in the book of Exodus chapter 3 verse 14. Ehya aser ehya. Okay, that is the contention that is being made. But is that all it is? Are we sincerely relating one particular phrase to mean that the whole of the book is claiming that Jesus is God? I would submit the answer is a definitive no. One of the things that we have to learn here is the principles that are attributed to hermeneutics. That is how you interpret things, okay? One of them is a basic one, yes? That if you have got something you are reading, if the literal element is the one that is making sense, yes, then you should seek no other sense. In other words, if the verse is clearly telling you something, why do you want to twist it to suit the way you are looking at things? So I would suggest, for example, if I go to the book of Exodus 23 verse 13, we are told, if somebody has got a Bible, can pick it up please, we are told about how the Creator says, yeah, 23:13, as soon as you got it, let me know please. You got it? Thank you. Yeah? It says, be careful to do everything I have said to you. Do not invoke the names of other gods. Do not let them be heard on your lips. Now, Exodus 23:13 says, do not invoke any other gods. My question would be, okay, if I were to take the understanding of Jesus being God, is this Jesus making the statement? Or is it God the Father? And if it is God the Father, is he also claiming that any other being that makes a claim to God is not to be considered? Does that include Jesus when he made the claim? Okay, this particular verse is explicit. Now, this is not only the verse, Isaiah 43 has got the same thing. The Creator is saying he is a jealous God. In what context is he? And if he is saying he is a jealous God, is this Jesus saying it, or is it God the Father saying it? And if it is God the Father saying it, what is the role of Jesus in this? Now, if this is going to lead to confusion, then I would submit to you that the principle should be kept in mind, that what is literal ought to be considered rather than anything else.
Okay, thank you, Shabir. Let's go through what he is putting out. What he's saying is we have to have proper hermeneutics. And he's saying, and he invokes Exodus chapter 23, verse 13. Do not use any other name. Have you noticed Jesus has not used any other name? Yeah. He was very clear. He was talking to Jews. He was talking in the temple. He was using Hebrew. The name that he used, Yahweh or Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh, is the word that he used. When he used Ehyeh, I am, as soon as he said that, he's not using any other name. If he had used Allah, then I would suggest he was using the wrong name. See, Exodus 23 verse 13 is very clear. You should also go to Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 18, because the same thing is asked there, where God's name is in verse 17. Now you like to go to Deuteronomy because you like to go there to see what it says about Muhammad. Let's just open up Deuteronomy. Verse 18, I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren. You bring this to us all the time. The problem is you don't read the next verses. Which is this prophet from among the brethren? But then it says, and I will come to pass that I will not hearken unto the words which he shall speak in my name. Which name is he talking about? Look at verse 15, verse 17. The Lord, there's Yahweh. But the prophet who shall presume to speak in a word not my name, to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded, or that speaks in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die. I will take you up on that. Every prophet must speak in this name. And what is this name? Yahweh. Ehyeh. Asher Ehyeh. Any other prophet that speaks in another name, we must put to death, according to verse 20. Don't just stop with verse 18. So what's the name your prophet brought? The name your prophet Muhammad brought is not Ehyeh. It is not Yahweh. In fact, you won't see that name anywhere in the Quran. But that's the name that all the prophets had to use to show that they were the prophets of this God. And why? Because it wasn't just the Father using it. In fact, it was Jesus that was using it in Exodus 3. If you have any doubts, open up to Exodus chapter 3. Let's just open up to Exodus. You have it in your hand. When you open up to Exodus chapter 3, start with verse 2. There was the angel of the Lord appeared to him. So who is this angel of the Lord? This angel of the Lord comes through over and over again right through the Old Testament. Look and see, verse 4. When the Lord, so this angel of the Lord is the Lord. When this angel of the Lord says, do not come any closer. Who's speaking here? The angel of the Lord, but verse 5 says, God said. So here this angel of the Lord is not only the Lord, he is God as well. And who is this person speaking? He is the one who is the Holy One. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. In Joshua chapter 5, verse 13 to 15, Numbers chapter 22, 31 to 32, we see the same thing repeated. And that's why, folks, when you look and see who's speaking here, this ego Eimi is God himself. He is the angel of the Lord who comes to earth. And it's the angel of the Lord that you will see in Joshua 5. It's the angel of the Lord that you will see in Numbers 22, And in every case, that's the second person of the Trinity. Now, it is Jesus, therefore, who is speaking to Moses. It is the same pre-Jesus, or the one who comes before Jesus, who is speaking at the temple in John 8:58. He is not using another name. Therefore, we do not put him to death. The Bible is not corrupted in this case. We pretty much all showed you that it is all consistent. All the way through it's consistent. But folks, that's not the only time we see ego Eimi. All the way through in the Old Testament, you will see ego Eimi over and over again. It comes up again in Deuteronomy 32:39. See ye now that I, even I, am he. There's the ego Eimi again. Who's speaking? God speaking here. Isaiah 41 verse 4. I, the Lord. Did you get that, Shabir? The first and the last. Who claims to be the first and the last? Jesus. Jesus does. In Revelation chapter 1. Okay, quiet, folks. So you have also Jesus. You have Jesus making the same claim in Revelation 1. That's it? That's 5 minutes? That's it. I'm just getting started.
He loves it.
My friend here seems to respectfully confuse the issue. We are talking about whether Jesus made a definitive claim to be God. The answer still is no, and he hasn't provided any evidence to the contrary. Number one. Number two, he resorts to Exodus, and it is an odd one here, okay? The verse says, and this is what he had read, number 4 said, when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush. Are we talking about one person or two persons? I would suggest two. If that is the case, it falls on to me to consider whether this particular verse again is talking about Jesus being the individual or the being. You see, Jay referred to verses in the Old Testament and said, look, here, ego Eimi is being used again. Ego Eimi is being used again. I'm thinking, it wasn't in Greek though, was it? The Old Testament, as far as I'm aware, is not in Greek. So how is he superimposing a Greek text on something that even up to this day the scholars have not been able to establish or identify? For example, he referred to Ahia, Asher, Ahia. Ahia, Asher, Ahia. That is the ego Eimi. It is contended. Well, if that is the case, okay, Ahia, Asher, Ahia. What was the true name of God according to the Old Testament? I will wait for Jay to give me that answer in his response. Okay? Because on that basis, we will be able to establish whether the phrase ego Eimi, which has been used many, many times in different contexts, does not necessarily mean it is divinity it is talking about. And we talked about hermeneutics. It is a simple one here. If there is a basic understanding, then that is what you must take first, unless you come across something you cannot understand. Now, I did mention the book of Exodus 23:13, and my friend Jay is contending that that is also Jesus. Well, there is no specific information claiming that, so we are left reliant on the interpretations of the people who claim that is the case. Jay also went into Revelation, and who is the Alpha and the Omega? It's the Creator. Well, who is the creator? Jesus. Okay, that's fine. You want to believe that? I have no issue with that. But the evidence is not stating that. What I have requested, and I'm still requesting, any definitive evidence which cannot be interpreted in a multitude of ways, which is what we are going to get consistently, I'm afraid, from my friend Jay. Nothing specifically claims that he is what they claim he is, that he is God incarnate. Now, Jay also mentioned the Trinity in between. Here is an added element of confusion, because if you are claiming Jesus Christ is a person of the Trinity, you are also making the admission that there are three separate entities. And if there are three separate entities, how can you definitively establish for me that the entity that spoke in Exodus 23:13 was Jesus? I would seek an answer from Jay in his rebuttal. Hey, have you given me a loose one here?
Yeah? You need to be a little more stable.
I know.
Be stable like me.
Thankfully, the latter is as I am. But, ego ami. Sorry, I didn't mean that. Okay, but if you think about it, just a joke. Yeah? If you think about it, it is very easy here. Jay has to definitively prove to me that Exodus 23:13, and that's one. I will be going into the others. Is definitively saying that it was Jesus God speaking there, and not Father God. He has claimed about the Trinity, then I would humbly submit to him that he now needs to definitively tell me, Exodus 23:13, it's not God the Father speaking, it is God the Son speaking. I will wait for him to give me a definitive response. Having said that, a bit further than that we go, if you go into Revelations, you go into the New Testament. The New Testament is based on what? On the Greek writings, okay? The Greek writings themselves will tell you certain facts. Ego ami has been used many a time. Yes? It doesn't necessarily mean just because ego ami was used, just I used it, I am stable, it doesn't make me suddenly God. Unless some very, very loving individual for me is going to make me God.
Okay. Now, did you hear him say that I said that Exodus 23:13 is Jesus? Did I ever say that? I didn't say that. Please don't quote me what I didn't say. God is speaking in Deuteronomy 18. Get it right. You can roll back the tape if you want to see. I didn't say that he's speaking there in Exodus 23. You're on shaky ground. You're going to fall off again. Deuteronomy 18 is very clear that God is speaking here. And he's speaking to Moses. And he's warning, like you see in Exodus 23 that you like to go to, that be careful of those who come in the name of other gods. That's the warning. And that's the warning we're giving all of you. Because we're saying much more than what he wants to say. These warnings are all through the Old Testament. The warning is, only trust when God speaks in his name. And that name is not Elohim, it's not Adonai, it is Yahweh. It is this name Yahweh that we're looking for. Eimi is nothing more than a translation in Greek. And it's also the translation that we see in the Septuagint. That's why we use the Septuagint, and that's why John, who was writing John chapter 8, verse 58, uses Eimi, referring back to the Septuagint rendering, translation of the Hebrew. But as I said at the very beginning, Jesus was speaking Hebrew. So he would have used Ehyeh, or Yahweh. That's the name that you will see all through the Old Testament. See, Adonai, we don't really think much about that name. That's a descriptive name for God. It's only found 300 times. We know that there's Elohim, which is a generic name for God. Generic plural name for God, around 2,000 times. But the name that's by far the most important name, the name that everybody knew is God's unique name, God's holy name, God's personal name, Yahweh, that we see introduced here in in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. That name is found 6,823 times. We don't have time to go through all of them. Why is it that your prophet Muhammad did not know that name? And why is it that that name is not found in the Quran? And why is it that that name is not found in any of your traditions? In fact, I would suggest The reason why that name is not there is because your prophet never knew God. And the name he did use, we're going to unpack in a little bit. We're going to look and see who Allah really is. And we're going to see Allah is nothing like Yahweh. Allah, in fact, we're going to find, is incapable of doing what Yahweh could do. And your God in the Quran, the God that Muhammad introduced, or the God that Muhammad used, he didn't introduce it. This God, I don't recognize. That's why I love it when Jesus actually used the name Eimi. Now we could go to other things that show why Jesus is God. We're sticking with Eimi today because of the impact that made on the Jews that were listening. The impact it made on the people right there who wanted to take up stones to stone him. Look at John chapter 18. John chapter 18. He brought it up again. When Jesus said, I am he was going to be arrested. They said, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And he said, I am he, Eimi. The Jews fell back to the ground. They fell back and collapsed on the ground, these Jewish guards. Why? Because here a mere man was using God's holy name, employing it, not just repeating it, not just speaking it, which no Jew could do. He was actually claiming it, and that's why they reacted the way they reacted. Folks, let's see if Allah can get that kind of reaction. We don't see Allah anywhere coming close to this kind of God, because what does Eimi mean? Or what does Yahweh mean? What does Ehye, Asher Ehye? Now, in the Septuagint, the Greeks have done a very interesting thing. The Greek scholars in the 2nd century BC, they didn't just say Eimi twice. They went Eimi ha'an. Are you familiar with this?
Yes.
Eimi ha'an. Why did they put ha'an there? Because when you're translating from the Hebrew into the Greek, if you just repeat Eimi twice, if you just repeat Ehye twice, as it was there in Exodus 3, for someone who was Greek would not understand that. That's why the Septuagint put Eimi ha'an.
10 seconds.
I am the be, or who is. We're going to unpack what that means the next time around, since I'm now out of time. But look at that and understand that before you go any further. And then come back and tell me, where does Allah meet those credentials? I have my own thanks. But thanks anyways.
I had asked Brother Jay to come back to some of the questions that I had asked, including Deuteronomy 18. Yes, I asked about the Lord and the God. I asked about Exodus 23:13. I didn't get anything that was shaky. Possibly for you it was.
I did answer it.
But if I can, you see, it was simple. I asked, can you definitively tell me, and I will ask it again, can you definitively tell me that it is God the Father that's mentioned there, or is it God the Son, Jesus? That's what I had asked, which I wait for you to answer. But going on what you said, you see, you have mentioned twice the Septuagint. Okay, you said the Greek form. They put ho on, you mentioned it, okay? Because in the original, it was repeated. The question is not that. The question is, and you also mentioned about how your prophet got it wrong, respectfully red herring, how the Quran respectfully red herring, because the issue is Jesus God? Now, it's simple. The Bible, and again I'm going to repeat this consistently, definitively does not state anywhere that he made the claim. On the contrary, we have statement after statement which clearly says that he was not God. And we are going to address those. Going on what you say, you see, if we look at Exodus 3:14, and you mentioned it again, you talk about the unique name of God. Ehye, Aser, Ahia is what we have. Did Jesus ever mention any other name? Elohim, Adonai, anything else? You are contending Ego Ami. Yes? Is that a name? I don't think so. But let us take it a bit further, because the Gospel of Mark, and you are familiar with this, 12:29. Mark 12:29. Yes? We have got the Shema. Okay? Thank you. Yeah? But there are two that people use. Shema Israel. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Israel, Yahuwah this question. If Jesus was not speaking Greek, as far as we are aware, he spoke Hebrew. When he uttered, as it is claimed in the Bible, when he uttered Shema Israel, Hear O Israel, Adonai Elohenu, Adonai Ehud. He himself rightly claimed Adonai is not one that we can really seriously consider. It's out. Adonai is out. So what is the name of God? That's what it says there. But it is for him to respectfully rebut what I am saying. Having said that, the question is this. Does Jesus ever make this claim definitively? We've already said no. So any verse that Jay is bringing up is merely subject to an extreme form of interpretation. When I talked about Deuteronomy 18, I asked you, it uses the word Lord and God. I contended there are two, and I said, well, if they aren't, please Jay, come back to me. But I still want an answer to this before we move to those other verses. I want an answer to this. When those words are being said by God in the Old Testament, are you definitively saying to me, bearing the evidence in mind, that whenever God is speaking, it is actually Jesus, the Son God, speaking, or is it the Father God speaking? Which one is it? I would appreciate a response from Jay in his rebuttal. But he restricted himself to ego ami. I'm sure he is aware, we are aware that ego ami, and you did point it out, is used many a time in many different contexts. Yes? So what makes this particular use by Jesus in 858, which renders him from first a prophet to a son and now to a God? Definitive reasoning required. It is easy for us to interpret things the way we want them, but evidentially we should have something which we can reasonably assess. Now, despite the effort of Jay to have ego Eimi fit into the Old Testament, he is signally failing. And the reason I say this is simple. Every time he uses a verse, I want to know from him first and foremost, is that Jesus the Son part of the Trinity which he accepts, or is it the Father God who is speaking? Because if you are going to tell me it's Jesus the Son, then we have got something which we can move to. If you say it's the Father, you are in serious trouble. Well, actually, either way, you are in trouble.
There we go again. Can you see he still hasn't answered my question? Why hasn't he answered my question? We'll come back to it again. You can see why he doesn't want to answer this question, because it is difficult for any Muslim to go beyond what exactly and who Allah is. But let's get back. You're talking about Mark, where Jesus quotes Yahweh Eloheinu Yahweh Echad. He's actually quoting Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 4. There is the Shema in Deuteronomy 6 verse 4. And what is the word Yahweh Eloheinu Yahweh Echad? Yahweh is the name we're looking for. That's the name we've been talking about. Yahweh is Ego Eimi in the Septuagint. Yahweh is that personal name for God. Eloheinu is a generic name for God. It's repeated a second time to show the emphasis on Yahweh again. This means that it is the eternal name for God. And that's in Hebrew how they get eternality. So this God Yahweh is before, is present, and is yet to be. That's why you have Ego Eimi Aha'an in Exodus 3, chapter 3, verse 14. If you know your Hebrew, you will see that this is the eternality that God is using. Now, who is speaking here? That's the second person of the Trinity, who is Jesus who is speaking. It is he who comes to earth, and it is he that is face to face with Moses. It is he that comes at theophanies all the way through. We've already answered that. You keep bringing it up as if we haven't answered it. So every time you have God face to face with man, that is Jesus. And it is Jesus who then comes again at the in 2000 AD, I'm sorry, the first century AD, 2,000 years ago, and spends 33 years on earth. That Jesus then claims to be God, not just once, just look at all the times. Let's just look and list. 10 times we can find right there in the book of John. John chapter 4, verse 26. Ego Eimi, right there to the Samaritan woman. John chapter 6, verse 20. when the disciples were out on the sea and the sea was churning up. There he gives, it is I, to calm them down. And then what does he do next? He calms the sea and speaks to the storm. Now who can do that but God? Only God can calm the seas. We see that in Psalm chapter 107, and also we see that also in Job chapter 9:8. He alone treads the waves of the sea and calms the storms. John 8:24. If you do not believe that I am he, you shall die in your sins. Folks, this is for all of you. If you do not believe that Jesus is claiming to be God right here, folks, we're all dead. So make sure you pay attention to what we're saying today. John 8:28. When you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am. There it is again. We've already done about John 8, chapter 50, verse 58. John chapter 13, verse 9. When it does happen, you will believe that I am he. Referring back to Isaiah chapter 43, verse 10. That you may know and believe that I understand that I am he. This is God in the Old Testament, referred by Isaiah, referring again Jesus, quoting the same verse. John 18, verse 5. Jesus of Nazareth, they said, I am he. John 18, verse 6, we talked about earlier. When he repeated it, they fell to the ground because they realized he was saying, I am God. How many more times do you need? You want more? Go back to Mark chapter 6, verse 20. Go back to Matthew chapter 14. In every case, Jesus was using God's personal name, God's holy name, Yahweh. The only reason we say Eimi because that's the Greek translation. I know that's hard for you to understand. But folks, you all understand what we're saying here. Now, he has not answered who Allah is. So who in the world is Allah? What is this name? And is it a name? It just means the God. It's generic. Shabir, do you even know where this name comes from? Have you done any study on where this name comes from? And secondly, did Moses use that name? Did Moses use that name there in the burning bush? In Surah chapter 20, verse 10 to 14. Tell me if you really believe that Moses even knew Arabic. Was there any Arabic at the time of Moses in 1400 BC? And if Allah is not God's name, then why in the world are you following the Quran? You've got the wrong God. You've got to come back to what really happened in 1400 BC. And the only way I know to do that is come back to the testimony of God himself, Jesus, there with Moses. Now answer those questions.
Right. First and foremost, the questions still have not been answered. Now, if Jay is actually claiming what I just heard him saying, that the one who turned up in the burning bush was Jesus. That's the claim he made. Okay, fine. He also made the claim that right through the Bible, it was Jesus who came. So what happened to God the Father then? I need to know. Consistently, the same problem is arising, and respectfully referring to who Allah is, well, the subject matter is not, is Jesus Allah? It isn't. It is Jesus God? Okay? If I can, yeah? So you see, Jay, despite his effort, and I commend him for it, is still failing in answering the principal questions. Now he also mentioned some very odd issues time and again, and I didn't pull him up on it. I was hoping that he would drop it, but he didn't. Okay? He kept on mentioning the Septuagint version. The Septuagint. Was there something before the Septuagint? Please do tell us in your rebuttal. Because if there was, I would want to know what it was that it contained which the Septuagint has changed. Because, and I'm sure he's aware of the history of these particular books, okay? Where changes have taken place, one needs to know why they took place. I would respectfully submit to all of you that the claim that Jesus is God is an entirely subjective belief devoid of the evidence that is available. It is simple. There is a serious problem when it comes to understanding how we arrived at where we have arrived. The idea that a man walking the earth being God in itself is illogical completely, because one would say, okay, fair enough, I am of a particular kind of outlook, and I do believe that the goat that is stood next to me is God incarnate. Why can it not be? Okay? The other thing, and this has been actually addressed many a time even with Jay, that if you look at the whole of the Bible, as he rightly screams out, from Genesis to Revelation, does it specifically restrict the Trinity to 3? No, it doesn't. So the question still arises. If Jay is confidently telling me, and I'll believe what he says, if he is confidently asserting that any time God is mentioned in the Old Testament, it is Jesus, then he has rightfully killed off the Father, which is expected. But having said that, it still is not definitive evidence that Jesus is God. You have to strain your interpretation to try and fit it, which you are entitled to do as a belief, no problem. But factually speaking, still nothing has been brought. For him to then turn around and say, why in the Quran does Allah? Do you know this? When we are talking about Jesus, let's restrict it. As it is, you are confused respectfully before you go to something else. Having said that, all I am asking, and I'll ask again, the verses are all there. You have resorted to some of them. Just because the word, and I want you to answer this definitively so that we can make a step, a progress of some kind. Whenever ego eimi is used in the New Testament, is it definitively claiming that whoever made that or whoever said that is claiming divinity? It's a yes or a no answer. If you think that is straining it, I don't mind, please tell me. But every time Jesus used words, and he is aware, although he did make a slight error, Jesus spoke in Hebrew or a form of Hebrew. It certainly wasn't Greek. And if you are going to contend it was Greek, then we need the evidence for it. So when it is translated from the Septuagint, because he mentioned it specifically, I would want to know from him, was there something that the Septuagint was translated from? And if it was, what did that contain in terms of the statements? That is what I would want to know. Jesus Christ came. He made simple statements. These are common amongst everybody. I'll use the most common one. John 5:30. I can of my own self do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just because I seek not my will but the will of him that sent me. Now, if Jay is claiming it's God, Jesus all the way through, then what? Am I to even remotely suggest here that one is being delusional, either the statement maker or Jay? I know which one I think it is. But having said that, the statements are very clear.